All right, so welcome everybody. Happy Tuesday, May 12th. Thank you for joining us. It's been a while since we talked. We're on the new every 2 weeks format. And we are getting, as we talked last time, into the aggregator phase. So a lot to share with you today. So thanks for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Alaska to kick us off here.
Sure, this is Cherry with SDS. Good afternoon, welcome, and thank you for coming. And as Kevin said, this is our bi-weekly format, so appreciate you coming and hearing what the new information is. Some of it will be revisiting and reminders, but always happy to share. Today, as Kevin said, we're going to talk more about the aggregator and a handful of other things. So please feel free to put your questions in the question and answer portal of the Zoom functions there so that we can answer those for you. And look forward to our discussions and questions that you may have today. Lotta or Lynn, do you have anything else to add?
This is Lynn. I do not. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome, everyone.
All right, let us jump into some things. Our usual disclaimer, particularly when we're pushing the envelope on the brand new things here. And all right, so welcome everybody. Today we're going to review the aggregator kind of phases, again, when it's coming to a world near you. And then some of the preparation you can do, or actually we're going to show working with the aggregator. We're actually going to give you a ability to see that today. And then how to get prepared for your time to be connected to the aggregator. And I think today will make that hopefully even more real to see what exactly that means, take some of the mystery out of it. We also are going to give you, we're going to talk about some service authorization changes. We had some discussion last week about authorizations that change in the middle of a year and how to deal with that. And it just so happens that, that is exactly what Therap is all about, dealing with authorizations, and they do change. And so talk about some different scenarios of how to address that. We're also there were some questions about using FBV in special situations. So again, just gonna review the functionality of an FBV device and how you can use it in different locations. And then just a reminder, if you are struggling with any of this and we can help, we are available. So please do reach out. All right. So again, I think it's clear we moved to Zoom. If you have friends that haven't signed up, tell them to go to therapevv.net, click on the picture of Alaska, and sign up for webinars there. Getting around in Zoom, right now we have you all muted. There's a lot of you here. I think we'll have time for open mics later. You'll click on that little microphone or that video if you want to share your microphone or video, and click again to stop sharing that. You should see those buttons on your toolbar. If you would like to raise your hand, please do. And that again will apply later in the kind of question and answer phase, just to help so 30 people aren't talking at the same time. Then there's two buttons here because we are in Zoom webinar, as I mentioned, versus Zoom meeting, which you might be familiar with. Zoom meeting has just chat. Zoom webinar has question and answer. So if you're thinking, should I use the Q&A or the chat? If you have a question for the panelists, type it into Q&A. It's much easier to organize and respond to directly, where the chat is just an ongoing flow of dialogue. So best place for questions is Q&A. We can answer them out loud. We can answer them in the chat, and everyone can see which answer goes with which question. Chat is a great way if you want to say hi to one of your neighbors and pop in there and say hi. Not as good for questions because it just is an ongoing flow of dialogue. All right, hopefully that helps you a little bit. You're probably all Zoom professionals at this point in life after COVID struck. So again, lots of ways to get help. There is a lot of materials. There'll be more aggregator materials posted soon here on our Alaska EVV webpage. You can reach out directly at Alaska Support. That goes to a lot of different folks. So we all can see it and get you the right answer. If you are logged into Therap, using Therap, at the bottom, there's live help. You can chat with somebody there. And there's a My Issues button at the top. That will be a not an instant chat, but an ability to ask a question to a large group of Therap, both experts and technical experts as well. And then again, you're struggling with any of that, reach out through whatever contact you had or through the AK support, and we will see if a call with you will be helpful. All right, again, that's myself, Jody, who has been working on this from the very beginning and probably trained all of you. Shawnette is also been involved in Alaska for a long time and has been kind of around this project as we've been rolling it out, and will play a larger role as we get into the aggregator and some of the training you'll need on the aggregator piece here. And Nadine may be joining us here today as our national billing director. And she comes into this in many ways if you're billing, as well as the use of the service authorization. So we'll talk a little bit about that and tap into her knowledge. All right. So again, I don't like to beat a dead horse or whatever you want to call it, but I do think it helps to remind us why we're here, what we're working on, particularly when sometimes there's a couple of things that might be hard. We are here because the Federal Cures Act, and that we're doing things the way we're doing them because Alaska chose the open hybrid model, which means you can use the Therap system provided by Alaska, or you can use an alternative third-party system. And whichever one you choose, they will all connect to the aggregator. And that is the phase we are getting into. So first you have to choose, collect your EVV data, and then it is required by that Cures Act that all of that information ends up in a standardized format in the aggregator for a whole lot of other reasons that we won't go into here, but that is why we're here. All right, so Therap was, and I think it's helpful to differentiate. There is the Therap provider system that providers are using to capture EVV, just like a third party. And then there is Therap's aggregator. So the aggregator is a separate component, a separate piece, but all connected and talking to the provider systems. So again, we reviewed this last week, but really quick, on the aggregator phases, we have completed the system design for the aggregator and the initial validation decisions. So the aggregator is going to judge the quality of your EVV data and make sure the required elements are there. Those again are likely to evolve over time, both for meeting federal rules and regulatory changes and things like that. However, the initial validation decisions are in place. Currently, we are in the user acceptance testing, and I'll actually give you a peek at some of that. This is all of the functionality with none of the PHI or the protected health information. Testing different business cases, different scenarios for provider things you might do as a provider and what the aggregator will say about it or respond. And then the production account online going ready for PHI is in the current phase as well, and targeting to complete that very soon here, end of the week. Although, again, there'll be ongoing reviews of that. So again, there are two pathways you might take, as we talked about, to be EVV compliant as a provider. And that means there are two pathways you will take, you could take to get connected to the aggregator. So we'll first talk about door A. You are using the Therap Alaska provided EVV system. In this case, we are identifying the initial users, and then a bit of the order that will go through. Not going to be everybody connected the same morning into the aggregator, and some of the setup and training you will need. So that is in process. We'll start to reach out to you as the Therap users as your number gets called here. You will get once on May 28th. We will be starting to go live in the initial production with the initial Therap providers. You will get training, and there's a little bit more review and setup. The more you have completed in your setup correctly, the less the aggregator is going to tell you what you're missing, and you have to go back and fix it after. So at the initial training, we'll review that. I'll review some new things with you, and then you'll start to interact with the aggregator in real time, basically. And again, we'll look at that. Once that kind of initial providers are completed, we'll start, one by one, working with the rest of the Therap providers and doing that same process, getting you trained, making sure your setup is all correct, and then turning on and pushing over your EVV visits and starting that to happen in real time. Again, ongoing, if you are a provider using the Therap system, you will get initial support, and then again, always the ongoing support anytime you are needing assistance. And all of those methods, there'll be more guides on the website. The email, live help, and things like that will all be resources to help you, particularly with the back and forth between your system and the aggregator. And we'll pause if there's any questions coming in on that.
Kevin, there's currently no questions in the Q&A box.
Okay, so let's, so essentially ending up, starting at the kind of the same place and ending up at the same place, slightly different time frame. The agency is using a third-party system. Your pathway, again, effective already, we're actually past this one. Oh, this one here. Specifications are going out to providers and software vendors that have completed all the required agreements, the BAAs and the aggregator attestation documents. Those who have completed those have specifications in hand. Again, those will be updated as life changes. They have the initial version of that. Updated specifications will go out, at any point in the future as those are updated. But if you are wanting the specifications and you do not have them, it is required that you have all the agreements in place. Sorry, go back here. All the agreements in place, and everybody has been contacted for those agreements. So some of you are taking a little time to review those. Please do complete that review, get those signed, and immediately following that, you will have a copy of the aggregator specifications, as well as the business case requirements that you will need to submit in order to be to have your software certified. That means, sending over good visits, making sure that you have all the elements required in the format required, and the aggregator has accepted it.
Hey,
so
Kevin?
Yes.
Sorry, this is Cherry. I just wanted to jump in here and let the providers know that we're going to be if we're needing to obtain documentation still, especially from our third-party users, anything to do with EVV, we're going to start coordinating all that correspondence through the approved program administrator for PCS services at your agency. We found some challenges to navigating all the various contacts in an agency, and so the best point of contact was identified as the PCS program administrator that's approved through the certification process. So Therap and SDS and others may be reaching out to that person on record, and that person can help facilitate with whomever is appropriate in that agency to obtain the needed documentation or information that we need to proceed with the EVV process.
Yes, thank you, Sherry. So yeah, you may not be the person who's allowed to sign off on the BAA for your organization, but you're the contact. So we're reaching out to you, help us identify that person and get them the required agreements so that you can move on and do which is likely important work that you need to do. All right. So specifications are in hand once agreements are in place, as well as the business case requirements. It is expected that the third-party softwares who have completed the agreements and have these specifications and the business case requirements will have access to a test environment June 11th. So again, if you'd like to be right there at the front of that, please do get those documents in place so we can get you all your contact and information there. For third-party software uses, again, from June 11th ongoing, as it's driven by providers and your choices and things like that. Certification compliance reviews will be completed on the Therap side as you reach out to us and indicate that you have completed the testing and provide those documentations. Starting June 25th, we anticipate connecting the third-party software systems into production. Again, that's the agreements are in place. You have the specifications, you've completed the testing, you've completed the certification, and then we will be working with you to connect. And again, probably one at a time on that as well, the process.
Kevin, there's a question I think maybe related to what I offered about contacting the program administrator to help facilitate obtaining documentation. There's a question if we'll be using the direct secure messaging system. And that answer is no. We'll be using the general email that is on record with certification of the person who's indicated as the program administrator. There is no PHI in this exchange and not a need to use the direct secure messaging system.
All right. I also see a couple of questions here. When will training start? So again, depending which group you are in, it will either start on May 28th or sometime around June 11th. Or if you're in a third-party system, it may be a different time for you. And that training is going to be the setup and what I'm going to review here next. I saw the question here. When we know what group we are in, we're reaching out to the initial providers currently. And so if you don't get something this week, you're probably not in that first group. You can expect you will be in the June 11th and after group. And we'll start the training again and reviewing your setup with you. And then we actually will do a manual push to push all of your data back from January 1. And from that point on, you'll be trained and you'll see how the data goes over in real time. So we'll start working with you. You'll start getting training before we do the final connection. and then we'll work with you through that process as well. So again, you will be notified by the end of this month, or if not the end of this week. All right, here again. So I'm about to just go over and show you this, take some of the mystery out of it, but some important takeaways. The aggregator is view only. View is based on your Medicaid provider ID or IDs. So the data coming in is chunked together based on Medicaid provider ID, same way as you probably are set up to collect it and bill against it. The aggregator will treat it the same way. You may have views of multiple Medicaid provider IDs because you have multiple Medicaid provider IDs. This is, the aggregator is not for PCAs, and it's not probably also for every one of your admins. It really is kind of a limited number of logins. You're just gonna go in and view things as you feel it is useful to you to do that. Aggregator is view only. The aggregator is a two-way interface. We'll see that between your EVV system. Aggregator, when your EVV system will push information over to the aggregator. When the aggregator receives it, it will process it and send a message back. That message is basically accept or not accept. And we'll talk about some of those nuances there as well. Aggregator will reject visits that don't meet the criteria. I say the aggregator is judging your visits. If things are not in place that need to be, aggregator is going to tell you what those are. And when it does that, you're actually going to get the message in your EVV, your provider system, and you're going to fix it there as well. How do you fix it? A lot of times it's going to be exception codes. That's what the exceptions are for. For some reason you didn't get all the required elements, you're going to put an exception code of why you didn't. All right, again, the best way to make life easy with the aggregator is become an expert in your EVV system. The more you get the EVV right, correctly with all the elements, the first go around, edits, up manually fixed when the staff forgot something, the less staff forget, the less of that, the more aggregator is just going to ingest all of that and let you know that it's all been accepted. You will need to continue doing any quality assurance that you are doing now, and there'll be kind of another layer of quality assurance. It actually gets a little easier in the aggregator, because the aggregator is going to do the quality assurance for you. It's going to tell you what is missing. All right, let us go look at all of this now here, and if there's any questions, please let me know while I pop over here.
There's currently no questions, Kevin.
Okay, good deal. Let me get this out of the way. And let's go into our demo again, all fake individuals, fake data in here, no real PHI. So basically, and again, I'm gonna only show this from the Therap system perspective. However, if you're using a third-party system, it will be, maybe visually different, but functionally the same. You really don't need to go in the aggregator. You will have some kind of a new feature, and here you see it in this account. I have an EVV configuration. This is very much a piece we will help you set up. And basically, the heart and soul of this is to identify a set of a password and a login, basically a client ID and a password that lets the aggregator know you are legitimate and something to let the data come in. So we will help you with that piece. That is really a one-time setup. The only time you would touch it again is if you add another Medicaid provider ID. So you add a region, you have a new ID, we'll come in and you'll configure that new one. So again, we will help you quite a bit with that step. It is something new you will see down here at the bottom in your scheduling admin tab. The other new piece that you will work with quite a bit is your Therap EVV visit search and bulk resubmit. So if I go hit search, I'm going to be able to search for 7 days at a time, which is in EVV terms, quite a bit of data here. So I will go search. I can also search by a status, or I prefer to filter later. So I'm going to search all the EVV data I had back to May 5th. And I can see quite a bit of these are accepted here. If I want to just feel happy about my life, I will click accepted, and I will only see visits that are accepted and the aggregator likes. This doesn't mean that I like it as a provider. If my staff checked out at the wrong time or checked in at the wrong time, I may still need to fix some of these, but the aggregator is not going to know that. You have to do your own quality assurance. These mean these visits have all the right elements in them and are recognized as a valid EVV visit. If I want to see what the aggregator did not like, I can switch to invalid, and you're going to see that the aggregator is going to give me quite a bit of information. So for example, my staff rendering provider ID is missing here. So the aggregator is not going to let those in. None of the visits from this staff person are going to get accepted until that rendering provider ID is in place. That's a required element. Here's another one where the Medicaid ID number is probably in the wrong format. So it doesn't recognize that as a legitimate Medicaid ID number. It must be fixed. None of the visits for individual 9 here will be accepted until that is fixed. Rendering provider. Here's one where an address is missing. Date of birth is also a required element. So it is telling me what is the problem with these visits. The address zip code is required. And so thus it's telling me how to fix them. So this one, it says address is required. If I click in this search view, notice I pop up on a new window. I'm in that visit. And so I can see here, this is absolutely missing. And it'd be nice if all this easy to fix. And of course, I cannot fix that without an exception code. So we'll blame the staff this time and say that was a staff error. And we'll go ahead and update that. We're going to reattest because we're made changes to that visit. And now if I go back and let's see, that was a visit on 5/5. So let's go back and search for that visit again. 5/5. And I'm going to look for updated messages. That is not it. You will see it's hard to replicate a validated status here. But validated means messages that are in transmission. So when you see validated, you know that, you have resubmitted that visit to the aggregator, and we are waiting for a response back from the aggregator to ingest that. And try to find that. Is it? It's not that one. I think it was this one here, but my visit is now, no, it wasn't this one. My visit is now accepted in the aggregator.
I think the one you selected might have been way far in the back. Like I thought I saw it.
Was it from the 5th?
I don't think it was from this month, the one you just did. It might have been one that was just kind of chilling out there. I do have a new one there though for on the 12th.
That is
Should-
accepted or invalid?
Yeah, I think it was accepted.
Okay. Here's one as well here. So, oh, this is from yeah, back in January. So again, there's a bit of this back and forth. You will see a visit, and as you fix it, if you manually fix it, you will fix them all. You'll fix that visit. It will automatically re-push over. Sometimes you will see, like in this one, a staff rendering provider ID is required. In this case, I will need to go over and again, not a training on how to fix rendering provider numbers. So I will go ahead and just pull up Seanette's, and we can review this with folks later. And I can see her number is too many digits. Oh, that 0 is too many digits. So I'm going to go ahead and update that and fix that. Now, there may be quite a few visits that were rejected before I noticed that that needed to be fixed. So I can then do a bulk submit for the date range that I need to do that. And let's see if we can find Seanette's here. So here's one of Seanette's visits. We could choose, I could choose multiple visits if I found all of Seanette's, or I can just click all of them and then bulk resubmit. That will now re-push all of those visits over. And again, assuming I had done those correctly, I will see them now accepted with the new information. There's also a, oh, I didn't get a rejected status here. There is also a rejected status. That usually means something just fundamentally was done incorrectly, like trying to change the rendering provider number after staff has already checked in to that slot. That will not be allowed. There are times you will have to manually go in and that slot's, you just can't use it. If for whatever reason, the wrong staff checked in, your best bet is to delete that and do a manual entry and explain why you did not get good EVV at that time. All right. So that is the bulk of it. A lot of the work is in obviously you can see a lot of those messages can be avoided by making sure the Medicaid numbers are right, rendering provider numbers are right, addresses are in the system, individuals are geolocated, those addresses are geolocated, things like that. So we'll review that. That will be your kind of setup review, and then doing a little bit more configuration to let the aggregator know that you are a legitimate source of messaging. In terms of the aggregator here, you will have a view. Again, not everybody, but your provider admins will have a view like this. I will be able to search my EVV data in here. What I'm going to see here in this EVV data list is only things that were accepted or previously accepted and then deleted. If the aggregator is telling you, if you're looking for a visit over here and you don't see it, it is most likely because the aggregator has either said that it's invalid or it's rejected it and told you why. So only this EVV view in the aggregator is going to be only the accepted visits. And again, I can look in dashboard mode and see how many IVRs I have, how many are more than half a mile away, Again, I can go look at any of these, but you notice in the aggregator, I cannot edit any of this. That is the design of the aggregator. If you see something in here that you need to fix, you need to move back over to your provider system and make that fix there, add the exception code, and then re-push that information over to the aggregator.
And Kevin, this is Lotta. We do have a question in the question box. And the question is, let's say a DSP clocks in an hour later and we change it. Do we still need to provide a written explanation?
I don't know about a written explanation. I can show you how you will need an exception code in your EVV system to explain that it is a manual change, and the exception code oftentimes will be the explanation, right? One of the exception codes is staff forgot to check in or check out, and there's always a place to add additional explanation. If you think it's helpful, I would absolutely add as much information as is helpful for future purposes. And I don't know if I
Kevin, there is another question.
Okay. I see.
Could you please show us again how you got to the window that you have open right now? So it's the aggregator.
Yes, I will. I didn't quite show you how. Let's go ahead and log out. This, you will get credentials from us. You will not be able to log in here until we give your provider admins the credentials. So it is a different login. If I log out, you'll get a little peek at it here. It looks a little different to log in, and it will be based on your email here. And I've got too many of these here. And yours will look slightly different than this one as well. You will come in and simply see your agency, your provider code, your agency name will be here on your dashboard. And then it will let you know that you are in Alaska, in case you did not know, and that you are linked to the Alaska aggregator. And it'll have your provider ID. You'll be able to search, you'll be able to switch over to another provider ID as well. Then the tabs over here are the ability to search your EVV data. As you saw, I can search my individuals. So if I want to see just what, oh, not ID, sorry. I want to see just what Kevin, oh, sorry, these are individuals. Just what, let's do Flora here has been doing. I can filter just for an individual, and we can see the update history, the different addresses, etc. I can search just for a staff information, and you can see there's I can see just Kevin's information, and if there's any changes to Kevin's information, I can see a list of all the exception codes that the aggregator is accepting right now and whether a comment is required. I can see the service codes that the aggregator will accept. Any other service codes in the service code field will be rejected. I can search my own user activity in here, so I can see which of my peers have been logging in and what they have been doing in the system here. I hope that answered the question.
And Kevin, we have another question. So using a third-party system, what does the process look like when a visit is rejected in Therap? And will we have edits and exception codes to add to a visit? What if the visit is completed, but is completely wrong, and we need to do a manual entry? So a couple of parts of the question.
So good question. One, I can't, mostly I can't quite answer that because it'll be how your third-party system deals with it. So visually it'll look different, but essentially if the visit is rejected in the aggregator, you can log into the aggregator and you won't see it. You will see some kind of a message and have some kind of a search functionality to look and see a message. And again, the messages that Therap pushes over is a code. Your provider may have different text here. Oops, sorry. But you will get some kind of a message in there as well. And then however your EVV system works, you will fix that visit. So the same way you would manually fix a visit now would likely be the same way you fix it. Again, you can look in the aggregator to see things. I think for the third-party users, it may be helpful to look in the aggregator if you're thinking you should be seeing something different. But if the aggregator says it's rejecting your visit, then looking in the aggregator will confirm that it's not there. And so you will fix it however your system fixes such things presently. I don't know if that was helpful or not. If it's completely wrong, like I'll show you in Therap, if I just completely don't like this, I don't want to fix it, I just want to be done with it, I can come in here and there's a delete button. This will then push over to the aggregator and tell the aggregator that is deleted, and it'll still sit there, but now it's a new status as deleted. Why would you want to do all this and go back and forth? Just to keep the bigger context, at some point, the Mmis system, when you submit a claim, is going to come over here and look in the aggregator and make sure there is a matching visit. So you want to get in the habit of getting your EVV data accepted in the aggregator so that at that future date, when a claim gets checked and says, well, they're billing for 2 hours on May 5th, and the Mmis system is going to go, hey, aggregator, is there 2 hours or 8 units of service on May 5th? And the aggregator is going to either say, yes, here's the accepted visit. No, there's no visit, to reflect that. If there is no visit at some point, the Mmis is going to say, well, you didn't provide the proof of service, the EVV, and reject that. So that day is not this day. So the work for today is, again, continue to get good EVV data from your staff, and your next step is going to be a little bit of back and forth and making sure you'll probably do this search. Someone in your organization will do this search right here at least once a week, maybe a couple times a week, and go look for what the aggregator did not accept and see what needs to be fixed. And again, if it's something like a check-in address, I can click it right here and fix it and resubmit with the exception code. If it's an ID number, those are kind of the nice ones. They're easy to fix and you fixed it all. But we're gonna actually work with you in the Therap system to fix all that before we connect you. So you shouldn't see those kinds of messages, but that's what they're there for. All right. So again, the aggregator, I almost think looking at the aggregator is a distraction. It's very cool. It's very fun. But you truly do not actually need to look in the aggregator. What you need to do is make sure your visits are accepted and fix the ones that the aggregator told you are not accepted. So that will be the new piece. There'll be a little refresher on setup and making sure that you are correctly set up so your visits will get sent over. And then you will learn how to double check what the aggregator didn't like however that works I'm showing how it works in Therap. It may visually and functionally flow a little differently in your third-party system, but the elements will still all need to be there and are there. All right. So coming to you soon. Plan a little time to learn that and add that to your quality assurance process. Okay,
And
good
Kevin, we
No
do have a
problem.
question. How many times can one person open to look at this? The reason I ask is that I'm in Therap admin for 5 offices with my agency.
All right, Rebecca, I think you mean the provider search versus the aggregator. The aggregator, you can all be in it at the same time. Again, you're not everybody in your organization is gonna have an aggregator login. You sound like you would be a person that would have an aggregator login. The provider search, yeah, you do want, I would coordinate a little bit. You're really not gonna break it. You can edit visits multiple times, but you're kind of wasting your time to edit something that somebody else is editing at the same time. So a little communication will go a long way there. But yeah, you all can be searching the visits at the same time and focusing in on the ones in your region or however you have divided them up in your organization.
Kevin, this is my personal question. With the question that Rebecca asked, won't the Therap system kind of lock the record if you're trying to edit, the same person? Does it allow you to look at the same record and edit at the same time?
I believe it does. I haven't tried to break it in that particular way, but you will see visits in the aggregator where there's not really a limit on how many edits you can push over. I think I've seen some that have 5 or 6 or 7 different edits to them. And obviously, that's not what you hope to happen in your life, but things can happen where you learn about one mistake and then you fix that one and you find out there was another one and so on. So a visit can be updated multiple times. My understanding, I will test that one, but my understanding would be both of those fixes would go over and be tracked in the record.
Thank you, Kevin. Now we
Yeah.
have a question for the state. So Cherry or Lynn, if either one of you would like to answer the question, when will the MMIS system start communicating with the aggregator?
Hi, this is Cherry with SDS. So we're planning that phase early 2022 at this point. We're in some discussions and design sessions, not so much quite design sessions, but requirements and understanding the workflow that between us and healthcare services and the MMIS.
A follow-up question, will every claim be verified by MMIS through the aggregator, or is it a QA check as needed?
So I do believe every claim is going to be validated through MMIS once we make that connection. Every accepted aggregator visit will be transmitted at that point to the MMIS. And if there's more to add to that, anybody else, go ahead and add to that.
No, that is the design, correct. Yeah.
And of course, we will keep our provider group in the loop, as we start moving closer to that target. Thank you, Cherry. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, good questions. Keep them coming. Again, keep working your EVV data. Get your staff to do it well. All right. Gonna pause there. Go check my slides so I remember what I said I was gonna do next here. And we said, we're going to again, now we're gonna talk particularly about managing your service auths and a bit of that setup here. and how you might go about. A lot of you have been trained on how to do it, and then the questions are more about when to do it, when to update, when to copy and create a new one. And also some of you, we talked about placeholder auths, which is an auth where you don't have an official auth from the state yet, but you would like to continue to provide services and collect that. So that is also part of that when to update versus when to copy. And again, of course, you know, if you do not have an auth, you are proceeding at your own risk. But if you choose to do that, you do need to put what we call a placeholder auth in there to allow EVV to stamp what service you are providing. And hopefully you will get that auth and be able to get paid for that. So, and then if we have enough time, we'll do a little bit of review on a particular question and review on some of the FBB. So I am going to see if I can turn over the screen to Nadine. Nadine, do you have the right powers here?
I do. It says you have to stop sharing first, and then I'll be able to share my screen.
All right.
I do like that proceed at your own risk, though. I think that's always a good reminder for, you know, authorizations like that. So, all right. So as Kevin said, we're going to talk a little bit about your service authorizations. And this is perfect timing. I think a lot of you, as Kevin said, you initially did a lot of your service authorizations, but now you're seeing some changes in authorizations. And it's really time to talk about how do you manage those authorizations in Therap. It was great that we got them all up and running and we're able to collect our EVV data, but now life happens and that's the way things go. So I will talk a little bit about some of the changes that you may encounter. Please feel free, if I don't cover something, to put a question in the chat. We'll try to answer as many today as possible. So the first thing that I can say, and I think I can stress this heavily, is to always check for new authorizations or changes in the authorizations in the Medicaid portal as regularly as possible. Probably at least once a week or so, you want to get in there and check for any new authorizations. That's going to be the #1 way that you will be able to keep on top of any changes and be able to collect the right data for those authorized services. The entire Therap module, or the billing module and everything, and even with EVV, it depends on information that's current today, and it's designed that way. Especially in the billing module, as I go through some of the searches and stuff, I'll show you that it's designed for you to work information currently today. Granted, there are certainly ways around that. And I realize, especially when it comes to billing, there's retro changes. And so we make all of that possible. But the best thing you can do is collect the right information to begin with. But like I said, things change and you have to update things. So let's talk about some of those changes. So first of all, I'll start with just a regular service authorization search. So within your service authorization search, there's a number of parameters that you can put in here in order to search what authorizations you have. You do not need to fill each of these fields. And sometimes these dates can be kind of misleading. Again, not misleading. There's a lot of different ways to use this, these search parameters. But if you want to see what authorizations you have currently today, all you have to do is come in here and click the search button, and you don't have to put any of those fields in. Now, if you want to check for maybe something that's been expired or something that's discontinued or other parameters in terms of if it ended after or before a particular date, there's individual's name up at the top that you can search, or programs. So there you go, your initial service authorization search. So I am also going to use this filter up here because that's a really good way to limit your searches. So I have a service authorization here for Virginia. I'm going to work with Virginia a little bit here. I'm going to back this up because I have some previous authorizations in here for Virginia that ended March 30th. So let's say that you have an increase or a decrease in your number of units. So that happens a lot. And most of the time your authorization is for about a year period. And if all you have is an increase or a decrease in units, this number of units here is what's going to change. You're not changing the planned year. All you're doing is increasing or decreasing those units. So you go to the right authorization that you have entered, and you can go into this update line here, and this update button here is what's going to update all of this information. Now, this service authorization has been in play for, January, February, and March. So I have EVV data that's been collected against it. You can see that I haven't billed this because my number of units and my remaining units are still the same. I know I've collected EVV data for Virginia. I just haven't generated her billing yet, which is fine. So if her units were increased, then I can increase this total billable units. So this total billable units here is respective to the date range on the authorization. So if I go up here to this begin and end date here, then when I scroll here to this, the total billable units, this 3,000 units is equivalent to what she has for the begin and end date. So your authorization is probably a year period. This is the total number of units that you have during that year period. And these dates are important to consider. Again, if you've had decrease in units or increase in units, just change this number here. Now, another thing to consider is that if your units decrease and you've already used them, so you saw before where I had the total billable units and the remaining units. If for chance my remaining units was, say I only had 10 units left, but there was a decrease in my total authorization, which took me to a negative balance, the system doesn't allow you to go into a negative balance. And so what you would have to do is void those claims. And then when you void the claims, your billing data goes back to 0. That means you haven't claimed and you haven't used those units. So it goes back into the service authorization. And that's probably what you want to do in order to stay in sync with any authorizations that have come out from MMIS. Also, another piece that you want to think about is how to manage those weekly authorized units. So down here at the bottom, there's this authorized units per period section. And that's where you can identify what to add in for that you want to authorize per week. So if you have that listed on your authorization, that's where you can put that weekly unit here. Now, one thing that you want to think about is also, how does that utilization, because there's a number of ways that you can manage your utilization in Therap. You can manage your utilization as just a reporting basis. So you wouldn't necessarily affect your claims or your billing data, but you'd be able to report on what you expected versus what you used. And that's your utilization, okay? And that doesn't necessarily, or it doesn't always have to affect your billing. It can though. So if those weekly units or any limitation that you want a hard stop on and you don't want to bill that past what you're authorized for, that's where this validation piece comes in here. So this validation says if this billable unit, if your billing data exceeds these units that you've defined here. So if we've exceeded 100 units in a week, so I've provided more service, say I've provided 120 units, what do I want the system to do with those extra 20 units? Now, this is where you'll have to make some internal decisions about your policies, okay? So if you choose ignore, then the system will ignore these limitations for billing purposes. You'll still be able to bill out 120 units. However, your utilization will show that you've gone over those units. So when you check the utilization report, which I'm going to show you as well, it will show you that you've your utilization rate is at 120% because you use 20 units over your 100 allotted units. So if you choose to ignore this and you bill over this weekly amount, be warned though that you may have some sort of recoupment later on with Mmis if those units are exceeded past what's been allotted to you. So if you're using this ignore feature, you really want to be able to make sure that you monitor it yourself and keep a steady eye on that. Now, if you wanted to use this restrict and continue, that's what gives you what we call a non-billable unit. And what that does, if I have 20 units that I've provided over my 100, so I've provided 120 units in this week, those 20 units will not be billed. The most I will ever bill to Mmis in that week is 100 units. However, I will be able to track that. So the system will create 100 billable units and 20 non-billable units. So you'll be able to see that that service was provided, but you weren't able to bill for it. So you can still report on that within the system. And then sometimes later on, as you're managing your utilization, if you find that you're under that utilization on a regular basis, maybe you do want to take some of those non-billable units and submit those as a replacement claim because you did provide that service. So that's an option also to claim, to later on claim those. Now, one thing that I also want to warn you about when you're changing these units like that, you want to make sure that, and I guess in your overall billing cycle period, is that you want to make sure that that EVV data is up to date and accepted on a regular basis. So you don't want to generate your claims, submit your claims, or even do any replacements or anything like that until you make sure that your EVV data is whole. Otherwise, when the Mmis checks for your EVV data, it's not going to be there and your claim is going to deny for other reasons. So that's definitely something that we'll talk more about as we move forward with the aggregator piece and just claims in general. I am going to pause here for just a second. Do we have any questions that have come in? I don't see any.
And there's no, well, let's see. It looks like we do have a question. If billing is not being done through Therap, will the authorized units per period and subsequent reports be applicable still?
Oh, that's a really good question. No, because the authorized units per period and the utilization report. So the utilization report is really a report of your billing data. So you're generating billing data in Therap. If you're not generating billing data in Therap and you're not looking, and you're obviously you're not restricting your billing data, so then no, this authorized units per period would not apply to you. That's a really good question though. So speaking of the utilization, I want to show how these units can be shown in the utilization report as well. So I'm going to save this. And then I'm going to update that. I'm going to go back to my list because I want to show you a couple more things with Virginia. Okay, so
Nadine?
Yes.
Do you have another question? It's how does the second option work?
Oh, on the authorization. So it works in the same way. There's a number of periods that you can select from. So you have daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and if I can make this bigger and get the mouse right there. Oh my gosh, it's the most annoying game in the world. I'm not sure who created this. Okay. Well, obviously. So these weekly period, these periods here, you can use up to two different periods. Daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, half yearly, and yearly. So what I usually say is that these period buckets are exactly that, buckets. So if you have your entire authorization for a year period, then that's one big bucket. If Within that year period, you want to split up those total, like, because we had 3,000 total billable units before. If I wanted to split up those 3,000 units into smaller buckets and different allocations, this is what I would use to do that. So I could have a daily bucket and a weekly bucket, or I could do a monthly bucket and a weekly bucket, or, you know, what have you. One thing to consider though, oh, there we go, is this validation here. When you use this restrict and continue, it does apply to both buckets. So if I had a monthly allocation of 500 units, this restrict and continue will apply to both restrictions. So it won't allow me to bill more than 100 units in a week, and it won't allow me to go over 100 units in a month. And so sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It kind of depends on how you want to manage those units. Again, there's a lot of options to consider, and I think especially when you're looking at at how to use the authorized units per period, my best suggestion right now is to start with that utilization report into what you're currently doing, because that's going to give you a really good gauge of what are you currently doing, and then what do you want to do? Where do you want to be to manage those units?
A follow-up question, Nadine.
Yes.
The same information. How about just the restrict validations? I guess it was a second radio button.
Oh, yes. I'm getting so ahead of myself. I'm excited to show that utilization report, because I think it's probably like one of my favorites in here. Okay, so just the restrict. So restrict is used if you are typically, if you're doing any type of date range billing. I really don't think it would apply to any scenario in Alaska billing, either with PCA or waiver or what have you, because you're not doing span billing. And so what the restricted does is it looks at the date span that you're billing, and however many units you try to generate, if you don't have that full unit, it will generate 0 units. So it's a more complicated restriction that I really don't think applies to any of your scenarios. If for some reason you wanted to use it, if you're interested in it and you want to talk about it more, please let us know, and I'd be happy to get into a conversation. I just don't really think it applies to a lot of people. And then block, I'll go into block also, because that might be another follow-up question. Block says you don't get any units that are exceeded after this 100. So once you build 100 units, the system won't bill anymore. So you won't get a report of those non-billable units.
And Nadine, there's another question, and I don't know if you want to respond once you show the billing report, but okay. It's a statement and a question. It seems important to change the number of weekly units on the exact date of the change for billing purposes. Wouldn't we end the one essay and begin another, even though they have the same essay or PA number?
That's a really good question. So, and one that I think we've kind of, a lot of people face at some point. So I'm going to go back here to my list of Virginia's authorizations. So one thing to consider with your authorizations is that there's only one date range associated with your authorizations. You have your begin date and you have your end date. Those weekly buckets that I showed you, there's still a weekly bucket. It's the same 100 units that's allocated to every week within that full date range of your authorization. So if your weekly unit changes on a regular basis, there's a couple of things you can do with that. One, you can monitor it with the utilization report, which, depending on the number of people in your program, and then depending on how often you do the reports, that may be an option for you. The other option is potentially you could create a service authorization for every single week. I don't really like that option. I think it creates a ton more authorizations than what you need in the system. I think it creates too much data, and in working with EVV and collecting it real time, it's just really not something that I would suggest. If you think that's an option that you want to suggest, I would say reach out to somebody at Therap. so we can talk through some of the pros and cons and ways to look at that, because creating a weekly authorization is just, it's bound to get messy at some point, and you want to make sure that you have the really good, you know, processes in place to capture that. So instead, I would probably look at the utilization report to manage that more so on a weekly basis. But you did mention one thing, that another thing that I wanted to talk about was that prior authorization number. So when do you create a new service authorization? So the only reason that you will need to create a new service authorization, exactly what you said, is if that prior authorization number has changed. So when I go into this authorization, that prior authorization is kept within this service line. So during this date range for Virginia, for her T1019 service, I have her prior authorization number in here. Or maybe I don't. So that's where I would say there is the PA number. Or actually, I think I'll say the SA number. Right? Okay, so that's where that goes in the field here. There's not a place on this authorization where I can put multiple PA numbers. So if you get a new service authorization number, then you're going to want to make sure that you end this service authorization and you create a new service authorization to start. So that's what I did here with Virginia's authorizations. I added, oh, I didn't update that. Oh, lesson, like, and you'd think I was kind of a rookie here. So I tell people all the time, I didn't update it. So, so it's like a double save. There we go. And then don't forget to scroll down and click update. I think I tell everybody, if you've been on a call with me, I tell everybody that. And there you go. I don't listen to my own lesson. So there we go. So now we have that service authorization number there, right? So you can see I have two different service authorization numbers for the two different date ranges. Now these two date ranges are really important. So you may also get into the situation. This is why when you're collecting EVV data, it's really important to check for that authorization on the Medicaid portal on a regular basis, because today is May 12th. So if I got a new authorization that started on May 1st, that means that for the past 12 days, my staff have been entering their EVV data against an authorization that's technically outdated because I've gotten a new one on the Medicaid portal. And when staff check in, if you're familiar with that drop down for, you know, where you on the spot where you select that service is actually, like, if you think about it, they're checking into a service authorization. It's really what it is. That service is. So if you ever get a slot that has two of the same services, it's because they have two service authorizations on that date range. So that's a really good way to think of that, because it doesn't look right. Like, hopefully when you look at that slot and you see two of the same service, you say, wait a second, that's not supposed to be like that. It's because you have two authorizations that have the same date range. So, so that's why you want to make sure that you check that portal often so that your authorizations are always up to date. However, like I said, life happens. And sometimes it's May 12th and I just forgot to check them last week. I don't know, what am I going to do? They've checked into all these services and it's a new authorization and now I don't know what to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to immediately end that service authorization, okay? So this authorization would end on May 30th. I would create a new service authorization that begins on May 1st. And then I'm going to put in that new service authorization number here. Another new SA number. Okay. And then I will save this. And then you can see I have all my information there, and then I can approve this. All right, it's important that I approve this. Now, when I go back to this list, you can see now Virginia has 3 authorizations. However, I still have the first 12 days of May that staff have checked in, and they should be against this authorization, not that past authorization that they did check into. So when your EVV data goes over to the aggregator, and when your claims go to Mmis, you really want that EVV data to hit this authorization here, not this one that really ended on the 30th. So we have this. So we have what's called this slot service bulk update. And we came out with this probably in the past couple months, I would say. I don't recall the exact time frame. But what this does is this will transfer your slots from one service authorization to the other, to the new service authorization. Now you want to be aware of a few things. First of all, this old service authorization form ID. So let me show you, if you don't know where the form ID is on a service authorization, it is this SA number that's right here. If I click on it, it's going to open up the authorization, and then it kind of goes away. It's in this blue eye. See where it says form ID, and it starts with SA. So that old service authorization, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put that here into this form, and I'm going to say these slots from May 1st until May 12th. That's the old authorization in there. And I want to copy that. Now, if you notice, I'm not putting in a new server. I'm not telling the system what new authorization to copy it to. That's because the system is going to look at this authorization here, and you can only copy it to an approved authorization that is during this time period that's for the same service. So you have to make sure that your authorizations are really for the same information, okay? Because the staff checked in at EVV to say, hey, I did this service on this date at this time, and you really want to keep that EVV data intact, okay? So I will say maybe there was an admin error because I forgot to check my authorizations on the portal. It happens. So then I'm going to update that, and then it didn't give me anything because staff really didn't check in May. So now I'm going to go back and say, oh, you probably should have checked in. But now when they go to check in, they have that new authorization there for them. And it will also, if there are scheduled, so that's another thing to think about is when you do this bulk update, if you have scheduled slots, okay, that maybe haven't been checked into yet. And let's say I scheduled Virginia out for the entire month of May already, and then I got her new authorization that began May 1st. It's another reason why you want to use this bulk slot update. It'll transfer your, I'm sorry, not the slot update. You want to use that the copy feature within the schedule. So make sure you change those slots that haven't been checked into yet. They've only been scheduled. Make sure you use that slot update to change what services are listed on your scheduled grid. Okay. Let's see.
Now we do have, Nadine, we do have a question and a comment. So I'll read it and let you respond. This is a bit confusing for myself as I'm not billing. The program associates and myself are pulling essays from the state website, creating the ISP program within Therap, and then letting our billing folks know. That way they complete their end within Therap. Should billing just be doing the copy and or discontinue and copy? So with this particular question, Nadine, I'm not sure if you're able to answer it or if Rebecca should, and Kevin, please let me know if I'm incorrect. Should Rebecca be reaching out to you guys directly to answer this, or is it something that you can answer in the town hall?
And Kevin, if you have any thoughts, I'm certainly happy to hear from you as well. I guess I would say that it's actually kind of a really good question because you have a mix of program, somebody within the program is worrying about quality outcomes and making sure that people get the right services that meet their needs. And then you also have those billing folks who are really taking care of more of this service authorization stuff. The thing is that with EVV more than anything else, it really forces both program and billing. You have to do more communication than you ever have because of the link between EVV. And because there's that billing component, there's a claims component, there's service delivery. You know, it's no longer at the end of the month, you just turn in your piece of paper where you did your service. There's a lot of communication that really has to happen between the program and the billing staff. I would say in this case, you know, the more that that the program can communicate with billing, I think you have to work out whatever that process is for your organization. And it looks a little bit different for each organization. But I guess I'd always say the more communication that you can have with internally, it's always going to be better. I don't know if that answered your question or not, Rebecca, but please feel free to ask more.
And yes, and definitely, you know, at some point, you know, you're kind of more, the question is more about your particular organization, right? Should your billing team, you know, that's definitely unique to your team and your organization. So give us, you know, a call as well if we can help more specifically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Kevin, I want to make sure I don't go over time. I was going to stop in and check out the utilization report. Are we okay on time?
I think so. I have like maybe a 1 minute thing to point out about FVV, but this is good stuff. So appreciate your here. Yeah.
Okay, good. So now we, you know, doing your service authorizations and managing your EVV data. And I've said this before about the billing module, is that in most billing systems, you may spend a lot of time working your claims and managing your claims. The billing module in Therap and our system as a whole is designed for, you know, quick service delivery, and there's more administrative piece, but that service delivery is quick, right? So you check in, you check out, you do all your stuff, and you work with individuals, right? So from a billing perspective, the more that you can make sure that things are correct up front in terms of checking the portal to make sure that you have the correct authorizations, managing to make sure that now that you've collected your EVV, that it's checked in against the right service authorization. You want to make sure that if you've expected staff to check in or check out or what have you, that those expectations are there. You want to review your time in and time out, and then you want to go generate your EVV billing, right? So I'm not going to go into that process there, that EVV billing. I think we've talked about it, and there's lots of user guides and webinars about that. However, after you generate that billing data, that's where you want to go check that utilization, okay? So after you generate billing and before you generate claims, check your utilization, because that's what's going to show you if you have, you know, if things are on where you're expecting them to be. So if I look at, let's say, I know we did a lot in January. So let's take a look at a January utilization here. So you can see I have, you know, there's 4 people here for this service. You can see the utilization shows when, how many units were generated for each date of service. But then over here, this is where those units, those authorized units per period come in, okay? So I've used 94 units for the month for, who is this? I think this was Timothy. Okay, so Timothy. So Timothy, within his service authorization, he has 100 units authorized per month, and we've used 94 already. And so he's got 6 units remaining in his authorization. And so his utilization percentage is at 94%. Now you can see there in January, you know, we still have, you know, half a month left that we haven't generated billing for. So if I've provided more than 6 units in this time period, I may go over that utilization. So that may be more, this percentage here is what's going to be over that 100%. So this is where I was talking about with on your service authorization, where you have that authorized units per period. If you choose ignore, then all of your billing data goes over to MMIS. So let's say within these other, you know, last week of the month of January, say there was, you know, 5 units per day or whatnot. Okay, so that's going to give you 35 extra units. that you're going to create, that you're going to generate during the month of for January services. So now on my authorization, if it says ignore, I'm going to bill that out to Mmis. Now that means I've gone over my monthly amount, and so Mmis may come back and recoup that later on because I've really gone over that amount. Or what you can do, if you had that restrict and continue, you would have 100 units listed here. So this 94 would be listed at, it would be listed as your 100 units, but you also have extra, I'm sorry, yeah, there'd be 100. So you'd be over, oh, what is that? Like 129, you'd be over 29 units. Okay. So, but you'd have 29 non-billable units for that month. Now, if you are, so the utilization report is really good for managing and watching that. So you can look at the daily you can look at the monthly and you can look at the weekly. So either one, I'll change my dates. Either one will give you those same percentages, and it pulls from that authorized units per period section there. So also, if you wanted to look at those non-billable units, this billing data summary, that's the place that you're going to be able to see. There's a column on that report that'll show you your non-billable units. So I'm going to wrap up there, Kevin. It looks like we don't have any additional questions open, but if anything comes in, or if anybody has any questions and you want to reach out to us, I'm happy to go through any of that at another time.
Thanks, Nadine. Yeah, I hope people found that helpful. There are a lot of layers to this. You can get deeper and deeper within your organization and your process. So at some point, you definitely want to consult with us and our billing team. But at a high level, my biggest takeaway is if your auth changes, you have to change your auth. So a bit of that, but then definitely some nuances about how to change it and when, depending on what changed. So yes, please do reach out if you want to get deeper and deeper into the weeds on that one. Again, as much as you do that in advance, also better for you. Let's see, we got just about 3 minutes left. Let's see if I got here. Get me out of this page. Here we go. One of the questions came up about using your FVV device somewhere else, perhaps even not in the state of Alaska. So again, I'm going to talk about functionality. Whether you are allowed to do that is based on agreements between you and the state. But if that is allowable, the functionality of an FVV device, they are reusable and reassignable, and an individual can have more than one of these. You would simply come in here and manage your FVV device. So you can see this one is generically identified as at the consumer's house. If I want to, and you can see in my example here, actually 3 individuals can be checked in and out because apparently the logic would be they all live at this location. If I want to move this, I can simply come in, and this is device specific. So each device has an ID number. If this device is going to be moving, I can change the address and the location and register that new location where that device will be. Now, if I'm carrying that around in my pocket, that is not what FVV is about, because that is not a location that Google knows your pocket. It is an address. So you do need to register it to an address, but that address can be wherever you say that the device is fixed at. In addition, so that is changing the device, the location, a location of a device, moving a device from one location to another and refixing it there. In addition, you can have more than one individual or more than one FVV device for an individual here. So you can see, oh, sorry, I'm in EVV mode or aggregator mode. So if I have another device here, Alan Brown's house, right now, Alan and Anthony, but Brianna is at the other location, but I can also add Brianna to this location, in which case when I check in with FBV, I will have a choice. Was Brianna at Brianna's house or at Alan's house? And again, you get to name these, whatever makes sense to you. So I could have another FBV device. We heard about individuals that maybe stay in different places in different times of the year. You could have an FBV device at both locations. You would just identify which location you're at as you're checking in, and it will not work if you put the wrong code in. So if I try to check in for this device with the code I got from the other device, it's not going to recognize it. So those numbers, while they kind of seem random, they are specific to a device, a date, and a time. So I hope that kind of answers that question. You can have a device for multiple individuals. You can have an individual with multiple devices, and a device can be moved. You just have to officially tell Therap where you have moved it to and where the new fixed location is. Any questions about that or anything else? I know we are at our time.
And it looks like we do have a question, Kevin. We have an elderly client that wants to show her family where she is to be buried in another part of Alaska. They do they do not have access to a smartphone computer. How do we do this with FVV?
I'm not sure. If it doesn't have an address, it's hard to fix it to a tree or something like that. Perhaps that might be a scenario for a manual entry. If it's a place with an address, you would register the new address. I'm not sure if that answers it or not, but
Yeah, that sounds like a good manual entry scenario, Kevin.
And put a good explanation of what was going on so everybody knows for other purposes in the record. But if they're staying at a hotel, for example, and they're going to stay there for 3 days, well, the hotel has an address. You could register it at the hotel or the B&B or the whatever. If that's the place where service is starting and ending, then you could register that hotel as the location and fix it there in the room for those 3 days. But if it's the middle of a cemetery, I'm not sure you could really fix the device there.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. And as always, Kevin, do you want to move to our last slide with our contact information?
I do here.
So again, if you have any additional questions, feel free to email us at dhssevv@alaska.gov because this actually, help us come up with topics and, questions, clarifications, things that we need to think about and answer and provide guidance on. So, Cherry, do you have any final words for us to close this out?
Just thank you all. As Lana says, it's sure helpful to get your questions and look for topics for upcoming needed training sessions like you got today. Use our EVV mailbox for any of that, and we'll be happy to facilitate any of the trainings and resources that you may need. We had a great attendance today, so thank you all. I appreciate you. We all appreciate you showing up.
Yeah, thank you. Kevin, do you want to close us out?
Thanks,
Final
everyone.
comments?
I'll give my little new airplane graphic just for Alaska.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Thanks, Nadine.
Talk to you more soon.
Bye, guys.
Thank you all.